So Darcy is the founder and CEO of Darcy Luoma Coaching and Consulting, and her firm specializes in solving organizations' people problems. So she spent her career supporting individuals and organizations define who they are, and ways to kind of define themselves in the work that they're doing. So after a couple of years of research, Darcy identified 6 obstacles she kept seeing like over and over again with her clients. And that's actually coming out in a book called Thoughtfully Fit that we're going to talk about today. And it's a training plan for life and business success. And we'll kind of look through how she outlines how to overcome these hurdles, strategies to work, and really talk about like what this is for our personal and professional lives. So, and I just want to put this in here because I think it's important. Darcy balances her life also as a parent of 2 young teenage daughters and competing in triathlons. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. Great to be with you today.
So with just thinking about all that's like going on today, I think Thoughtfully Fit is a really great way to kind of think about how to build like resilience. And so I'd just be curious, like, how did you come about kind of this design and this offering that you have as Thoughtfully Fit?
It's such a great way to tee it up, Brendan. It's talking about how it helps you to have resilience, because indeed, that is really at the core of being thoughtfully fit. I designed this after being I've just finished my 23rd season of doing triathlons of every length. And I learned and have continually, it gets reinforced that the more I train, the easier they are, right? Surprise, surprise. The race will still be the same length. It'll still have the hard hills and challenges. But if I'm trained, it feels easier and I perform better. And also I'm less likely to get injured. And so that was the spark behind Thoughtfully Fit, is that I kept noticing these themes on the obstacles that my clients would bring into coaching. And to be honest, they all had similar hurdles. It was like different players, different flavor, different names, different details. But at the essence of what they were challenged with, it was always similar hurdles. And so that's what was really behind creating Thoughtfully Fit, is being able to create a training plan to help people overcome those hurdles so they can get back to doing what they do best. And so they can really be on that path to success and really focusing on their purpose instead of focusing on the people problems that are getting in the way of them being able to, do what they love.
Yeah. And so you define this kind of the core, I would say, of Thoughtfully Fit is actually like, and tee this up wrong, but like you talk about engaging your core. And I think just really as an athlete or as an individual, anybody out there that's like trying to get back and lose those pandemic 15, understand that makes a lot of sense. So like when you say that, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I love that the pandemic 15 and the core physically helps no matter what. If you want to lose weight, you want to play basketball better in the backyard, you want to be able to put your own suitcase up in the overhead bin, the core is essential for everything. In the same way, Thoughtfully Fit has a core, and that's where you're always looking at, what do I control and what are my choices? Because a lot of times when bad things happen or when we have challenges or adversity, it's easy to feel like we're the victim. It's easy to feel like, oh, I don't control anything. Certainly, most of us would not choose to have a global pandemic. We would not choose to have conflict with our coworkers. And so we feel a little out of control. But the reality is, when you have a strong core and you engage your core, you don't become the victim to your circumstances. You focus on, okay, so this really frustrating, hard thing happened. What do I control? And then you explore your choices instead of just seeing it as 2 bad choices. Like I quit my job or I stay and be miserable. No, there's lots and lots of other choices that are available to you when you are focusing on what you control, instead of just like being frustrated that my boss isn't the way I think he or she should be.
Right. So in essence, what you're talking about is like how to start building in those moments in between when you first have this like reaction and then when you respond to it.
That's exactly what it is. You're right. And so at the core, it's 3 simple steps. So you talk about engaging your core. Yeah. Step 1 is to pause. You have to get off of autopilot. Exactly what you just beautifully bottom line, Brendan, saying, putting some space between your emotions, your thoughts, maybe sometimes those sabotaging thoughts or those strong emotions that create the urge to react impulsively or overreact. You pause as step one. Step two is to think. And that's where you ask yourself some thoughtful questions. And it might be, okay, what do I control here? You might ask yourself, what are my choices? How do I want to move forward? What do I need? What's triggering me? How could we find the win-win? There's lots of choices, there's lots of questions you can ask. And then after you have paused to think and create some new awareness, step three is to act, and to act thoughtfully. So just like you don't want to react impulsively, you also don't want to just silently stew, which is why I say you have to do all three steps in order, and then wash, rinse, repeat. So after you pause and think and then act, you can pause again and think, okay, how did that go? Did I get the results that I wanted? So then you can adjust and pivot if you need to act thoughtfully again.
Yeah, and so how does someone start to develop this? Because I think it sounds great and like it makes a lot of sense. But I know for myself, who especially in my youth was a little bit more fiery at times, and you have that pressure, right? There's a lot of anxiety and pressure to perform in any given moment. So how do you help people to even make that step, and then continue in this kind of protocol?
Yeah, I love that word, fiery.
It's my grandmother's word. I have to keep using it. Yeah.
Is that how she described you?
Uh, to the public, yes. Maybe not at home.
Oh, that's so sweet because it's like there's a warm edge to that. It's not right fiery. So that can be really positive,
Sure.
and our strengths taken to the extreme can become a negative.
Right.
So
Right.
being too fiery, or having
Adding
a
too much wood to the fire. Yeah. It just depends on the
yes,
day. Yeah. You gotta
right.
tend to it. Yeah.
That's right. So, how do you do it? Well, you start where you are, first of all, and then you have to train and practice.
Mm.
So, just like if you decided that you wanted to do the turkey trot, right? You're going to do the 5K. You aren't going to wake up on Thanksgiving morning and just decide to go run it. You, at least not without it being really miserable and hard and possibly getting hurt. You're going to train and practice. And you might start by just buying a new pair of running shoes and jogging 4 blocks to the neighbor's mailbox and walking home.
Yeah.
And then the next day, you jog 6 blocks and you walk home. And you build up the strength to be able to, until you can do the full 3.1 miles without stopping. In the same way, if you want to build your core, you start training now, today, right now, when your listeners are done listening. And I guarantee life will present opportunities before you put your head on the pillow to pause. There will be somebody who cuts you off in traffic. And so instead of just having this knee-jerk reaction and flipping them off and risking road rage,
Mm.
maybe that's the place that you pause and you think, do I really want to give all this negative energy to this stranger? Or is there another choice? What do I control here? Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm just going to wave them in and smile and just choose to not be upset, choose to not be angry, and act, right, in a different way. And when you can practice and train on the little stuff, hitting the pause button, and when you're trying to, get in the parking spot at Target and somebody pulls in front of you, when you get that frustrating email, instead of reacting, hit the pause button on the small things. And the more you do that, the easier it gets. Just like the more you do sit-ups every day, the sit-ups on day 30 are still the same, but they don't hurt as much. They don't make you quite as sore because you're building up your strength.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you have to do an additional set to get to that same thing. So you've kind of pushed yourself to that next level. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's such a great point. So, and that's exactly what we're going for, is that this becomes your new default. So when you're beginning to do sit-ups, it hurts and you're sore. And like the next day you think, I can't do this again. But all of a sudden, a week, Later, you're like, 20 sit-ups, that's nothing. I have to do more to get that same fatigue and soreness because you're building up your strength, you're building up your muscles. In the same way, when you're thoughtfully fit, you can build up your mental muscles so that your new default is to be thoughtful. Your new default is to pause, especially if you're fiery and you have a tendency to sort of react impulsively.
Yeah.
That pause will become more natural. It won't feel as hard. And if you're on the other end of the spectrum where you maybe are silently stewing, you aren't fiery. You're the one that's going to say, it's not a big deal. I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to rock the boat. That might work in the short term, but in the long term, that's where you get resentful. That's where it builds up and eventually you blow. And so, in the same way, if you practice and engage your core and practice on the small things, it becomes your new default. It becomes your new habit. And so you don't avoid that tough conversation. You actually pause and think, and then you go and act. And it becomes easier. It's not as hard the more you do it. And I'm a testament to that because while your grandma called you fiery, I was on the other end of the spectrum and I
Okay.
didn't ever want to rock the boat. And that doesn't get you results that you want in life either.
Yeah, because then you're kind of just waiting, I guess. Is that kind of the opposite?
Right, you're waiting, and then you're also if you're being a doormat and you're saying, "Oh, it's okay. I'm not going to say anything." So then you're, and I'll say me in this case. So if that's
Mhm.
where my default is, then I lose, you win. Now, if that's a choice, that's fine. But for the long term, to always be in this place of it's not a big deal, I'll just let them. And I'm constantly losing, and the other person's winning. That relationship is out of balance,
Mm.
and it's not sustainable any more than you might be further on the high D end of the spectrum, like the dominant, the disc profile, right? More, and you're gonna like, I'm gonna be fired. I'm gonna win. I'm all in. I'm competitive. I'm gonna win, and they lose. Again, in the short term, that might work just fine. But over the long term, that relationship is out of balance. And you can't be the one that's always winning and the other person's always losing if you want to have a long term successful relationship.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I like thinking about that too, and I think a lot of us can see those different relationships and then start to like really contemplate maybe how to get them back into that balance that we're talking about. The
Absolutely.
the next piece of this that I just really appreciated, and I think it's because we've seen I think a lot of dialogue about this over the last year, but the way that you've kind of distilled it is very like accessible, and it's around stillness training. And I'm thinking about like what this process is, and yes, like this practice that people are doing, but then there's this other way to like to build this into our bodies, and it's to actually like practice what I, especially for me who has a lot of monkeys in my mind, right? Um, is a challenge or was a challenge until I started understanding a little bit more what mindfulness was. And so I just be curious, like when did you start to incorporate stillness into your life and kind of your career work? And then also like how is it that you work with people to kind of these simple
Mhm.
practices that they can start just doing now?
I wish I could say that I incorporated stillness by choice, but the reality is, um, my body shut down and forced the stillness. And
Mm.
and indeed, a lot of times illness is our body's way of saying, time out, enough, uncle. And I was I mean, I'm a type A, type double A, perform, right, to do, achieve. And I woke up and I was exhausted. I was so tired and I kept pushing harder, thinking, okay, I don't know what's going on. I woke up with stage 3 adrenal fatigue syndrome. And that was my warning to say, time out. You got to stop pushing so hard. And so I had to create some more stillness in my life. I didn't have to, I chose to,
Mm.
because the alternative was to keep going down this path of, frankly, illness. My body was telling me I was going too hard. And so when we talk about being thoughtfully fit, and it's a metaphor, if you want peak performance physically, every athlete knows you have to take rest days. You don't weight train 5 days in a row. You don't even weight train your arms, upper body 2 days in a row, because your muscles rebuild stronger on the rest days. Anybody who is a peak performer physically knows that rest is essential. In the same way, if you want peak performance in your life, in your business, you have to build in stillness. You have to build in time to quiet your mind so that you can be more innovative, be more creative. You can have time for your thoughts to settle so you can solve problems. And if you are going, and this was me. I mean, I'd get in the car, I'd turn on NPR, I'd be listening. I'd get to work over the lunch break, I'd put on my podcast, I'd be listening. I was constantly on. It took me a level of discipline to build in stillness because it doesn't come naturally for me. And so I actually have had to create structures in my day. For some people, stillness comes very easily and it's more natural. It's not something that comes natural for me.
Yeah, could you share what some of those structures are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have stillness practices that are daily, and then I have ones that are more creating stillness in my life at a meta level. So what do I mean by that? Every morning, I now have, if the girls get on the school bus, they're off. I have my morning stillness routine. Now I used to call it meditation, and I found that kind of messed with me because I was like, am I doing this right? I'm not doing this right. It felt too charged for me. So now I call it sitting. I sit in the morning with my coffee. In a nutshell, I'm meditating. But for some reason, that feels intimidating to me, and I feel like I'm not doing it right. So I have a practice in the morning where I sit. I sit for a half hour. And if I miss my morning stillness routine of sitting quietly with my coffee, I'm not reading the paper. I'm not reading my social media feed. I'm not doing emails. I'm sitting. If I miss that, I feel it. I feel it during the day. I feel like I'm agitated. I'm not as grounded. I'm not as calm. But I also have stillness practices that are more structured. So for instance, I get a massage every 10 to 11 days. That is a stillness practice that forces me for 90 minutes to stop. And I love massage. I have a stillness practice of going floating once a month. So I go in the isolation tank, and if somebody's listening saying, wait, what is this? Just Google it. It's incredible. You go in this isolation tank where there is no input, and the air and the body of water is the same temperature as your body. There's 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt, so it's very healing. And I am there in this tank for an hour, pure stillness. That took me, I'd probably say at least a half a dozen times. Like the first few times I went, I'm like agitated. What do I do? What am I doing? Am I doing this right? When is it over? I don't have a watch. I can't tell. Now my body, I've trained the stillness. I love floating. But it took me a while to train my body to be able to calm down, to enjoy the stillness, to be honest.
Well, and what's so wonderful about that balance is you have that daily practice that again is more of kind of like that personal space that you're providing, but then you have two that also are physical, right? That you're actually like, especially with massage, you're physically releasing the energy that may be the stress that's stuck and trapped that we all know about. So it's great that you have both like kind of this mental and then an embodied practice as part of this routine.
It is, and you know what? Can I share one more?
Yeah.
This was critical for me to create more stillness in my day. So I used to work for one of our US senators, and I would schedule meetings back to back. So I'd have a meeting scheduled from 9 to 10, and somebody'd say, can you meet at 10? And I'd say yes. Okay, in what crazy world can you end one meeting at 10 o'clock and start another at 10 o'clock? In my crazy world, it was great. It was insane.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn the hard way because I went nonstop all day. 5 o'clock would come, everybody would leave, and I'd be sitting there thinking, okay, that 9 o'clock meeting, oh, what did I tell him I would do? I gotta take notes. I gotta make sure that I've got all the action items. And it took forever to process and go through my days so that before I could, and I wouldn't leave until 9 o'clock at night. I now create buffers. Every single appointment has a buffer, minimum 15 minutes. Anybody on my team who has access to my calendar and scheduling meetings for me has been trained to put a minimum of 15-minute buffer. The default is 30 minutes. Once in a while, it will get condensed. So what does that mean? 15 minutes before every meeting, I have nothing except time to pull the notes, to get present, to get ready, to get my mindset so that when the meeting starts, I'm ready to go. And then at the end, when it ends at 10 o'clock, there's a 15-minute buffer, no appointments till at least 10:15, so that when I'm done, I can quick type up my notes. I can send out any action items I need to. I can file it away and be done. That's a stillness. I mean, it's a stillness routine that I had to build in some more downtime to my day. And that was hard because my fear was I would be less productive. I'd be less efficient because I'm giving up a lot of time in a day. Exactly the opposite has happened. I'm more productive by building in those intentional moments of stillness and buffers in my calendar.
Yeah, well, and I am an ADD kid, so like the idea of also the organizational aspect of that is brilliant because now instead of trying to go back at the end of the day and do all that sorting and management and things like that, it's part of the agenda item. Like I love that. That's a really elegant solution.
Yes, and what you just named, like it's part of the solution. And what I found is, let's just say that 15-minute buffer right after the appointment is enough time for me to take whatever notes I need, to do the action items, to file things away, and to complete that. When that wasn't happening until 5 o'clock because I was so full all day, that 15 minutes was oftentimes 20, 30, 40 minutes because I'm having to think back. Oh, I told him I would call somebody. Who did I say? Or was the action, is the ball in his court or my court? And it would take me all this time to go back and recreate the conversation. So it was incredibly inefficient. And I think people who have ADD, my daughter does as well, need to create systems to support themselves because their minds do move quickly. So this is a thing that I created. I don't have ADD, and it has helped me tremendously.
Sure.
And so if anybody who does have an added challenge, whatever it might be, or OCD, you name it, creating systems for stillness is an effective way to be able to maximize your time.
Yeah. I'd like to go back, I think, a little bit or go a little bit deeper. I'm realizing like with the stillness practice and what that does in terms of how, like, just solidifying that ability to pause, which then kind of comes into this idea of thinking. And so one of the questions that we've had or thought about a lot is around the uncertainty when you have these different pathways that you're going to take. And, your process definitely allows for that intentional thought to come in. But how do you support people that maybe, okay, they paused and they have the questions, and then they're still unsure of what it is, which direction to take when they act?
Yeah. What's essential is that you have to ask thoughtful questions. You have to ask thought-provoking questions. So this and the whole model with Thoughtfully Fit, I designed based on the curriculum that I teach. I teach the professional coaching program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I teach and train people to be executive and life coaches. One of the most important skills that you can have as a coach is asking thought-provoking questions. When you are engaging your core, pause, think. You're asking yourself thoughtful questions. And without practicing, a lot of times the questions we ask, whether it's of another person or of ourselves, are not thought-provoking. It's like, oh, God, so you've got this inner trash talk. Why did you say that? Okay, that's not a thought-provoking question, right? Oh, why did you do that? Or what's his problem? Those are not thoughtful questions. And so what's essential is to ask yourself questions that are designed to create new awareness. They're not questions that are designed to create blame or judgment or criticism or gossip. So how do you do that? can I give just a couple of tips on how you can ask thoughtful questions?
Please, yeah.
Okay. So you want them to be open-ended. Ideally, and this is like a playbook that I wish I had when I was first learning. So think about asking questions that start with what or how, because those are going to create new awareness. They're open-ended instead of closed-ended questions, which are yes, no. Have you, can you, did you, will you, should you? That doesn't create new awareness. And so, what's hard about this? What do I want? How can I overcome that obstacle? What do I need? Those are much more thoughtful when you open them up to start with what or how. The other tip is to be very cautious on asking why questions, because why questions tend to create defensiveness, whether it's of someone else or yourself. Like, why were you late? Why didn't you take the dog out? Why is that report not done right? It just creates defensiveness, as opposed to our goal is to create new awareness. And so it's not that you would never ask a why question, but honestly, if as you're really training yourself to ask thoughtful questions, maybe you just start by avoiding them altogether, or reframing it instead of like, why do you want to do that? And like, what's important about that? That's a thoughtful question that creates new awareness, that doesn't put you on the defensive. Why do I want to do it? Well, because I think it's important. What do you mean? What's important about that? Oh, well, what's important is I really want to step into my purpose and play big. Same essence, but by asking the question differently, you can create new awareness instead of creating defensiveness. I feel like I'm maybe going on too long, so let me pause there and see if
No, no,
that's
no.
helpful.
I think that's really helpful, because it's really just reminding you to be curious. Like, even in these moments, whatever the reaction and feeling is, if you allow yourself just a little bit of curiosity of, like, the why am I feeling this way, or what is it that's happening that I'm like questioning, and then you might be able to go from there to connect and then figure out what to do next. I guess, is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely. And you're exactly right. It's stepping into the curiosity. And so that's where new awareness comes. And I always train, when I'm training new coaches, I say the curiosity is for the client's benefit, not for
Mm.
your benefit. And so, I'm not going to ask somebody, well, when did that happen? And what did you say? And what did he do next? That's all curiosity for my benefit. That's not creating new awareness for the other person. And so you want to shift. What the goal is, you're not a detective trying to solve a problem and I need all the details so that I can give an answer and fix it. You're trying to create new awareness so that you have access to more creative and innovative solutions.
Mm.
Oh, so what happened when he said that? How did you feel? What was hard about that? What's the relationship you want to have? Those are powerful questions, as opposed to, well, what did you say? And then how did he respond? And what were you wearing? And when did you send that email? None of that is creating new awareness. And I realize as I'm talking, I'm sort of giving tips on both ways, both how to ask thoughtful questions for yourself, but also if you're in relationship with somebody else.
Yeah. And it guides them into the solution that they want, that empowers them to make that decision. I think that's the wonderful part of it. Definitely.
Yes. Yes. Bingo. That's exactly right.
So we're coming down to the end of the conversation. I'm just curious, is there any part of this that we haven't touched on that you think is really important for people to know?
Do we have 3 more hours?
Fair, fair.
I mean, what's important is that you give yourself the time and the grace to be able to start where you are and to be able to start training and practicing right now. And so if you think, oh, I don't know, I could never do this. My relationships are so out of balance, or I don't know how to create stillness. My calendar's overwhelming. You just start right where you are and take what is the next step. What is the next smallest step I could take to move forward? And indeed, when I'm coaching clients, I can't tell you how many times after, let's just say 4 months, they'll say, "Oh my God, Darcy, I've been trying to solve this problem for 4 years, and here I am 4 months in, and it's solved. You're brilliant." And I'm like, "No, I didn't do anything. You did it." And what they did is at the end of every session, I do coaching sessions every 2 weeks. So at the end of every session, I say, "Okay, you hit the pause button on your life to be here to think, to create new awareness. Now, with that awareness you have, how are you going to act? What's your homework? What is your action item just for the next 2 weeks?" And what we're looking for is an action item that is attainable in the small short term of 2 weeks. Not, "Oh, I need to quit my job." It's, "Okay, what's the next thing I'm going to do? I'm going to find and print my resume." That's all, right? I mean, it's just the smallest step. And then when you regularly have these small action steps, all of a sudden after 4 months, it's like, "Oh my gosh, here I am. I've done it." And so if there's one piece of wisdom I have for people is just look at what's the next smallest step that you can take to move forward.
Yeah, there's a proverb in Ethiopia that I like that speaks to this, and it's just step by step the egg learns to walk, and they kind of use it as like for a lot of children as this guiding process of just what you're saying of, just step by step, right, and you'll get there. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful in its simplicity.
so if people hear this and they're interested in either working with you or learning more about this process, where can they go? How can they engage with this content?
Yeah. So two main ways. DarcyLoma.com is my website. And that has our blogs are all archived there if people want to read more. We have Thoughtfully Fit Thursday videos, lots of free content. You can learn more about coaching, consulting, keynote speaking. The other source, and it has all the social media handles, right? We're on all the socials
Yep.
channels. The other source that people might be interested in is thoughtfullyfit.com. And so the book, Thoughtfully Fit, that just was published in June, goes through all 6 hurdles. What are the top 6 hurdles that get in the way of being peak performance, of having peak performance? The quiz, 2 or 3 minute free quiz, gives you your biggest hurdle. And the number one thing you can do to move forward is create self awareness. And so, with that awareness, you can find out what is your. We talked today just about one of the 6 hurdles, which was stillness. That hurdle, there's so much to do, I can't even think. There are 5 more hurdles. So, going to thoughtfullyfit.com, taking that free quiz will spit out your biggest hurdle, and then it'll give you a strategy on how to overcome that hurdle. Same strategy that I use with my clients, same strategy that I outline in my book.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, and for if anyone does that, make sure to send us a note. We'll post and share because I think it'd be cool.
Yes.
Yeah, and definitely recommend if you haven't already. This was a great read. So I think it's a really compact way of thinking about all of these things. So thank you for being with us and sharing all this insight that you've gathered.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to be with you today.
Cool.